Hi, it's Nathan again from I Need IVF. We're here today to talk to you about embryo hatching. Embryo hatching is an assisted reproductive technique that is used predominantly within private IVF clinics. It's not used so much within the NHS. And let's have a look at that. So in order to actually understand whether embryo hatching is worth getting as part of your IVF technique, we've got to understand the rationale behind it and why they think it might work. So let's just take a very quick look at that. So your eggs, when they come out, they have an area around them, just indicated here, called the zona. That zona is effectively a membrane. That membrane is important for a number of factors. So it allows the sperm to bind. This is called the acrosome reaction. Basically what it is, it's like a lock and a key. It allows the sperm to pass through the zona into the centre of the egg to fertilise. Simple. But it's quite clever, this zona. It only lets the sperm in. It doesn't let in any other cells. It doesn't let in bacteria and infections. And importantly, as the egg is developing into an embryo, it doesn't allow the cells and the cellular material that's contained within the egg out. So it has a really, really important function. Now this zona at an early stage is between 13 and 15 micrometers. So it's very, very, very small. But actually, after fertilisation, as we move through the process towards a blastocyst, what happens is you've got your blastocyst in there, you've got your cells dividing, you've got a very small layer, and then you've got your zona again. So what happens is as you go through the process towards a blastocyst, the zona gets thinner and harder. That's important. So, what happens then when a blastocyst in natural conception, what happens? So you've got the endometrial lining of your womb, and this blastocyst moves towards that. Now what happens is your endometrial cells and the blastocyst itself let out enzymes, chemicals that effectively break down this zona. So what happens is you get an egg, you get the zona which has been tackled by itself and the endometrial cells, and you get a gap that allows the embryo to hatch and then implant. So I've tried to keep it really, really simple. There's lots of complexity around this. But in layman's terms, that's the rationale. So if we help the hatching process, can we ensure that blastocysts more successfully implant and then result in a higher number of clinical pregnancies? That is the question. So, before we actually get onto the research element, I want to talk to you a little bit about the techniques that are used within acid hatching. So one of the older ones is chemical. Effectively, what they do is they use a substance called an acid tyrose that is used in a micropipette. It's all done by hand, and that is then placed directly onto the zona to create a gap in the zona. To assist in hatching. This took a very, very steady hand because too much of the fluid and it would actually penetrate into the internal cellular membrane and internal cellular structure and actually damage it. So that is still used, but it's not used anywhere near as much. Mechanical is exactly what it sounds like. Somebody manipulates it and cuts a little bit of the actual zona away. Again, a highly, highly, highly skilled job. Again, it's not used anywhere near as much as the more recent methods. So laser technology. Now this one is used quite a lot in today's day and age. So what happens is you've got your zona around your egg, Okay, and they use a laser to basically target but not actually cut through the zona. So what happens is a very high intensity micro laser will be used to actually cut a bit of the zona out so that you've got a thinner area for the embryo to actually hatch out of. And finally, the last technique that's used is called piezo, which is actually, it just means vibrations. So it's vibrations created by an electrical current, and that is then used to just trim away at the zona, but it gives them so much more accuracy, and it means they can take it down without damaging the actual cells itself. So let's look at the research around assisted hatching. So Cochrane are effectively the gold standard of research within the health and social care sector. They are advised to be used within our universities when people are studying to be doctors, nurses, and anything within the sort of medical profession. So they did a review of a number of trials. I think there was 31 of them. They studied 1,992 pregnancies in 5,728 cycles. They looked at a lot of things, but the most important statistic that came from that was that they stated there is no significant difference between those that used assisted hatching and the control group. So a control group is one whereby they don't have the procedure. So there was no significant difference between those having assisted hatching and those on the control group in terms of live pregnancies. So they found no evidence to say assisted hatching actually helps all the way through to a live pregnancy. A slightly more recent study was done in 2016, which looked at cycles of those first cycles. So it was looking specifically at the first cycles of those going through frozen embryo transfer who had this procedure. They looked at 151,533 cycles. This was a very, very, very large sample size. What they found in their sort of data sets and their meta-analysis is that actually assisted hatching reduced live birth rates from 35.4 to 34.2%. Now, this is really, really important when you are considering whether you want to get embryo hatching, assisted hatching as part of your IVF cycle, especially if you're considering paying for it. So you're thinking about having it. So let's look at a couple of things. Are there any risks associated with it? Firstly, this is an invasive procedure. There is always a chance that they could damage the embryo during this process, which means that it would not be able to be used in your IVF cycle. So that's something to consider. The risk to yourself, there is no additional risks because this is a fully laboratory based process. In the UK, the cost of assisted hatching in a private clinic looks to be on average around £600. So that's a fairly steep price for something where there's very little evidence supporting the claims. And in fact, it's rated red on the Human Fertilisation and Embryo Authority. So it's really important to understand that. So do I think that it's worth getting? I think for 99% of people, it absolutely isn't worth getting. One of the things that the Cochrane report does talk about is that it says that more evidence needs to be gathered because there is a potential that it could help older women who the zona that we were talking about earlier is naturally harder and can be naturally thicker as people age. As such, if you are older, then this technique potentially could help you, but as I said, there is no research to support either way as of yet. And then the only other area where it suggests more research is to be done is those who have gone through multiple IVF cycles have managed to fertilise, but actually nothing is implanted as of yet. Again, it suggests that more research gets done about that. So again, there's no supporting evidence for or against it other than what we've seen here. So I think ultimately my gut instinct is to say assisted hatching is no, unless you have those specific situations and at £600 you are happy to add that to your bill. Thanks ever so much. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit subscribe. We are a new channel, so it's great to connect with you. And I'd love to hear your specific thoughts on whether you think that embryo hatching is worth it, and whether you've got any success stories or stories where you've actually had it and it hasn't helped. Love to hear from you. Thank you.